Yeah,
Good morning, Alana. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I understand you got in late last night,
I did about like one something in the morning, but
but you're
I
sufficiently well rested?
I think so. I woke up by myself at like 7 my
Got
time.
it. And I think I saw your mom post, it looked almost more like wrestling. I assume it was
It
your
was
usual.
it was still jujitsu. It's just a different rule set, which might make it look like wrestling.
Okay. I think of jujitsu as standing up, but this you guys are kind of rolling around on the mats.
Wrestling is more standing up, because jujitsu you can pull guard and there's more on ground
Got it.
grappling.
Okay. Well, obviously I don't know what's going on with jujitsu, so I need to learn more. Last time we talked about you finishing up the Python course and then maybe starting Harvard CS50, um, and that there were some concepts in the in the Python towards the end that were difficult. Remind me, you're completely done with Python, is that correct?
Yes.
What were the hardest concepts at the end?
Um, well, to be honest, there were a few just details, or different um, functions that I didn't learn how to do. I have pulled some code that my teacher gave me to run up.
Mhm.
Um, can I share my screen?
Please do.
Uh, you have to enable screen sharing,
Okay.
but that has a few of the things that I couldn't understand mixed with things that I can understand.
Yeah.
So it makes it a bit easier to decipher what it does, but I'm not entirely sure. There we go.
And this was Zwilaki?
Yes, Socratic gave me this code to run.
Got it.
So I guess we can start off with the imports. I know what some
Okay.
of them do. I mean, this one imports JSON. You use it in um, code, and then this is the import URL lib. And then I understand some of this. I know this is making a variable and checking if it's true or false, and then doing specific things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, certain functions like this one, where it has certain key names and certain things it does once you call those key names,
Mm-hmm.
I do have some trouble remembering them. I do have a helper to remind me sort of what it does. Um, and then when we go down here, I know what try and accept is, I know ifs, and I know how they work. I know prints, continues, and stuff, but things like this are have or I don't know what they do.
Got it. So first of all, it's really helpful to know what you know and know what you don't know. And so it's great that you're clear on what you don't know. Um, have you either Googled or asked GPT for help with any of these?
I have Googled some. I don't have access to GPT right now.
Okay.
But I need to do that.
Maybe let's go from the top and see exactly where we need help. So first, URL lib request. I assume that's a URL library.
I think so.
Import.
Because
Do
it's
you know
important.
much about those?
I know some. I use them in different projects most of the time.
And you have a sense for what a library is?
Sort of. A library is like a specific place that contains a specific amount of um, functions that you can do, or they're all related, to be honest. I never understood that in depth.
Okay, no problem. Again, so you said you did understand JSON. Tell me what JSON does again.
So, from what I recall, and this may not be 100%
Yeah.
accurate, JSON is a a program that, from what I remember, like cleans up your code or does something to your code to make it do something. I'm not entirely sure what that does here. It says JS equals JSON.loads data. So I'm assuming it has something to do with pulling data or just data.
Okay. And then since we're on the imports, let's look at the third one that you may import. SSL, that is?
It gives me an explanation here,
Oh,
but off the
excellent.
top of my mind, I don't know. This module provides some more Pythonic support for SSL.
And do you know what SSL stands for?
I don't.
Okay. I'm going to start right now. I'm going to Google JSON and see what it is. First, I have, in terms of libraries, I see a library of code. Let's start there actually, because we want to be pretty clear on what's going on when we have a code library to begin with, and then we'll understand what all of those are. And so my sense from back when I was coding was that sometimes there are pieces of code that you use over and over again. And rather than write them from scratch all the time, you can have these libraries of codes. It's sort of like when if you were to write a book and you needed to kind of have the front piece that always said, this is my copyright, or something like that. And the reason I give that as an example is if you were to write another book, you don't need to have an original statement of this is my copyright. You could just, as it were, call this is my copyright library, and it could just plug it in. And so here I'm going to put in chat libraries in Python. And I always like to kind of learn bit by bit. Because I think if you have a clear understanding of what a library is, then the particulars make sense. So normally a library is a collection of books, or is a room or place where many books are stored to be used later, right? Similarly, in the programming world, a library is a collection of pre-compiled codes that can be used later on or in a program for some specific well-defined operations. Other than compiled codes, a library may contain documentation, configuration data, message templates, classes, values, etc. But I think the main thing is, what I'm getting from this is this collection of pre-compiled codes. Does that make sense to you?
I think so. What that means is just it has a set of hard-coded functions or pieces of code that you can use from the library.
Yeah, I mean, I expect what's happening when you have the command import is import tells the computer to go to the library and grab URL lib request, URL lib parse, URL lib error, JSON, and SSL. Go grab those pieces of code and have them ready to use. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that way you don't have to rewrite them. I bet we could look up the code for each of those. And I don't know if you know how to write those or not yet, but you could imagine, I know coders who do their own libraries. So suppose you always wanted to write all of your programs with something that said hello world or something like that. I expect you could write a piece of code that was hello world, and you could have a library of Alana's code library. And instead of writing the code for hello world every time, you could say import hello world. It would go grab that code and would make that happen. So then you can focus on writing the rest of your program. Does that make sense?
I think so. So libraries are sort of like functions, but that are already pre-made, and so you just call them. Is that accurate?
Exactly. And they're broader than functions because, as it says, it could contain data, message templates, and so forth, everything you need. Here's the next statement of it, and it expands on it a little bit. A Python library is a collection of related modules. It contains bundles of code that can be used repeatedly in different programs. It makes Python programming simpler and convenient for the programmer. as we don't need to write the same code again and again for different programs. That's kind of just what I was saying, right?
Yes.
Python libraries play a very vital role in fields of machine learning, data science, data visualization, etc. I think that's just saying that I think Python libraries could be used anywhere, but a special role, or maybe it's those complicated fields. It's nice to have big libraries with lots of stuff ready to go.
Yes.
Let's see. This I couldn't use more, but would you say you have a pretty good sense now of kind of what a library is?
I think so.
Okay. Now let's do a piece of code. I'm looking. I've got a good library Python thing, which maybe SSL, or which one do you want to look at first? Let's put it that way.
I think SSL.
Okay. Okay. Python SSL. What does it mean? So I like to. Do you like to Google for stuff?
I do.
Yeah. And I always, it's interesting. There are different levels of understanding, and it's kind of like when you're reading a book, you can kind of get a sense for what it is without quite knowing what it means, but it helps if you understand more clearly. And so that's why, especially because if you keep going, like I'll use the analogy with reading a book. If you read a book and you sort of kind of know what some words mean and not others, at some point you kind of get lost and you feel like you need to go back and look up the words. I think the same is true in coding. You can kind of keep going, but at some point you kind of get lost, and it's good to be clear about it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so SSL, I'm still looking for what SSL is. I have something that tells me, how can I tell if I have SSL enabled, but it doesn't tell me what SSL is. And that's why you need to get good at Googling. And this is why I don't have, actually I do have GPT on my phone. Let me see if I can look it up on my phone. Let's see if GPT does a better job than Google.
Okay.
What is Python SSL? Okay, let's see if it's smart. Okay, Python's SSL module is a built-in library that provides SSL, which means Secure Sockets Layer, and TLS, Transport Layer Security, encryption functionality for network communication. It allows Python programs to establish secure connections over the network, such as connecting to HTTPS web servers, creating secure sockets for network communication, or implementing secure protocols. The SSL module in Python provides classes and functions for managing SSL/TLS certificates, configuring SSL/TLS contacts, and performing secure socket operations. It allows you to secure your network communication by encrypting the data sent between the client and server, ensuring the confidentiality and integrity of the data. So how is that?
I think I'd have to read over that a few times, but what catches my mind is the data between server and client. Does it do something to that data?
That's a good question. So I'm just going to type this first part so we have it. Provides SSL. Secure socket layer. Have you ever heard of secure sockets layer?
I think once or twice, but I'm not sure what it means.
And TLS, transport layer security. Have you ever heard of TLS, transport layer security?
No, I haven't.
Okay. How about encryption? Do you have any idea what encryption is?
Not very big. Not a very big understanding. No.
Okay. No problem. Maybe let's start with what do you think encryption is?
Encryption. Well, I'm not sure what the word means, but it sounds, or the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear it is like encrypting or putting like putting something into another object. Like for example, maybe in a program, you would put another piece of code into it.
Okay. And before going into encryption a bit more, I see you posted something. Is that what you Googled on SSL?
Yes, it's just, yeah, I found.
Let's
Um,
SSL is standard technology for securing an internet connection by encrypting data sent between a website and a browser or between two servers. It prevents hackers from seeing or stealing any information transferred, including personal or financial data. So I think it is important to figure out encrypting. Cryptography, have you ever heard of cryptography?
yes, or no, I'm thinking of cartography, not, no.
Okay, so encryption is coding. It's related to, actually, this is tricky because of course we need coding, but go back to like spy codes. Have you ever like tried to put something in a code so nobody else can read it?
Yes, multiple times.
Is that like in spy books you've done or games, or where have you done that kind of thing?
Um, to be honest, it's usually just making a secret language between my cousins and I. That's
Fabulous.
usually what I
That's a
do.
great example. That's a really great example. I remember doing that as a kid, and I think it's so much fun. Do you guys have multiple secret languages?
We didn't, I don't think we have multiple, but we did come up with one the second to last time I saw them. And I did forget most of it, but it was fun.
Excellent. No, that's a sort of you're doing a secret code, kind of, and it's a form of encryption. So the whole point, in spy, I don't know if you've ever seen spy movies, but if in a war, the Americans in World War II, we were fighting the Germans, and we didn't want the Germans to know our plans, and so we had to encrypt our messages so they couldn't read them. And actually, as an interesting case in World War II, we actually used Navajo code talkers, where instead of kind of making up a secret code, because Navajos only live in the United States, the Germans couldn't figure out how to speak Navajo. So in World War II, we actually used native Navajo speakers as our secret code. But normally encryption means creating kind of a secret code. How did you and your cousins create a secret code? Well, you don't have to tell me the secret, obviously, but was it like, did you change letters or something, or how did you manipulate things to make it secret?
I mean, to be honest, it wasn't that uh change. I mean, we didn't really follow a specific code. We just came up for words or different words for words. For
Got
example,
it.
like some other word was hi or go over there.
Got it. Okay, that totally works. I've seen some codes where maybe instead of A, B, C, D, and so forth, you have the letter 1, 2, 3, 4. So a very simple code encryption, actually a very simple encryption algorithm, because I want to start using that word, is, let's see, if we have the number 1 instead of the letter A, if we were going to say Alana, then it would be 1, and then we'd have to figure out what letter of the alphabet L is. And I don't know if it's 12 or whatever, and then 1, 12, and then another 1 for A, and then N, whatever letter that is, another 1. So you can imagine if we agreed on a code where we used numbers instead of letters, normal people they would see this string of numbers and they would have no idea that it was saying Alana. But if you knew that 1 was A and 2 was B and 3 was C and so forth, then you could translate that code and figure out what any set of numbers meant in letters. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's a very simple form of encryption. And when this says encrypting data to prevent hackers from seeing or stealing any information transferred, a lot of times we want to encrypt things when we send things over the internet. And one example, the financial data makes sense. Suppose that your dad wanted to send money about his bank account so that somebody could pay him. Obviously, you don't want people to get information about your bank account so they can steal things. And so it's really important with bank account information that it be encrypted. And there, it's not just, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. There they use very, very difficult sorts of codes to crack or encryptions to crack so that people can't steal the money. And occasionally somebody does, encrypt something and steal stuff. But I think we're at a point where most of the time we know how to encrypt things, so it's really hard for anybody to read it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And so this SSL, secure sockets layer, secure tells me that's about the encryption thing. And then the piece that you got also says it's about encrypting data. And so what I'm getting from this is that there's a library where if you want to send stuff back and forth over the internet, you, Alana, don't have to write new Python code encrypting the data every time. All you do is you call the SSL library into your code, and then when you engage in the internet, the SSL library automatically encrypts it. Does that sound right?
It does.
Okay, so this is, you're getting definitely into the weeds. And we didn't get all of the libraries, but I want to be respectful of time. But you see how you can kind of Google each thing in the library and get a good enough understanding. So right now, we don't know exactly how it encrypts the data. We don't know exactly, I don't know what a socket is exactly. Do you know what a socket is?
No, I don't.
Okay, so again, with more time, what I would do, and part of this is if you can make the program work without understanding everything, that's okay. But at some point, you will have to understand it. And so, do you like my analogy of when you're reading a book, you can kind of get away without knowing words for a while, but then too much? En español es posible que tú entiendes, pero cuando muchas palabras que no entiendes, entonces, ¿qué pasé? Did that make sense?
Yes, it's the same thing for every language. I was
Exactly.
reading a book in Old English, and I had no idea what a lot of the words meant. And I didn't. It was hard.
Exactly. And I bet if you started getting a few of the words, and not just getting the words, but in that case, knowing how Old English is different, so there's certain kind of shifts or changes, that would allow you to get to guess a few more words. And I'm personally fascinated with this process of kind of bit by bit making sense of things. Where initially, yeah, Old English, what? But if you start to get a few words, or even in Spanish, I'm sure that you've heard people speak things in Spanish where you have no idea what it is. I don't know, how is your Spanish? We haven't checked. You're muted.
My bad. I'm moving along pretty well. I'm continuing to do Duolingo. And I'm also trying to learn Portuguese because there's so many people around me, mostly in my gym, who learn how to speak. So I've been able to pick up a few sentences here and there in both languages.
And sometimes you hear them and you don't understand them, and sometimes you partly understand them, and sometimes you do understand them.
Yes.
Exactly. See, that's kind of what it is with this code too. That's why they call computer languages computer languages. It's not exactly like a human language, but you can see, hey, I need to know what SSL means, and I need to know what a socket means, and I need to know what transport layer security means. And it's a little bit like learning the vocabulary in Portuguese or Spanish or Hawaiian. And bit by bit, we just need to kind of keep learning. And with Google and GPT, then you can learn more quickly by just going out and getting the information. Make sense?
Yes.
All right. Well, are you meeting with Sulake 4 or 5 days a week over the summer?
I am. I'm going to try to be there at least a few days a week.
And are you starting the Harvard CS50?
I am. I did start it. I'm almost done with the first week. I may not do it specifically week to week, but I'm getting there.
Okay. And is it hard or really hard?
Well, right now I'm only on the first level, and that's in Scratch. I've been doing Scratch since 2020, but I just haven't done it in a long time.
Yep.
So it's a bit easier than the other languages that we'll probably be doing.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I'm very glad you're doing it. And I do think it starts early and relatively easily. I'm glad it starts in Scratch and you have experience in Scratch. And maybe you and I can kind of keep working on these basic concepts and vocabulary, because I'm certain you'll need to understand what encryption is. My bet is you'll have to understand what SSL, secure sockets layer, is, and what TLS, transport layer security, is, and so forth. So, with both Zwolaki and I and yourself and Google and maybe GPT, let's just keep understanding all these concepts so you can become as fluent in coding languages as you're in English, where you're obviously very fluent. See? Okay. And what are you going to do for today for fun? You're muted.
Oh gosh, I didn't do that. I must have accidentally pressed it. Today, my brother's friend has a birthday party, so I think we'll be going there. It's definitely going to be a restful day because I had a very long few days, or past few days in Dallas because
Yeah.
the time changed.
Of course, of course. Well, take good care of yourself and have a wonderful week. Okay.
Thank you, Michael. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.